Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carlos Mesquita, and I'm a previously homeless man who, until 3 years ago, almost to the day, was living as a homeless man on the streets of Cape Town. You will notice from my first slide that the title of the presentation today is different to that is on the program for the IJOH conference. The listed title on the program is a concept 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness in Cape Town, South Africa. And although I will be referring to it throughout my presentation to you, I've shifted the focus for this afternoon's presentation. I feel that Cape Town has been granted a window of opportunity to either become a leader in ending chronic homelessness or forever regret an opportunity lost. And so I thank the International Journal on Homelessness for giving me this opportunity to do this presentation today, which is also going to be my plea to those in my city and country who impact on decisions regarding Cape Town, to understand the severity of what we are currently staring in the face with regards to homelessness and to make a difference. When I came out of homelessness in 2020, I committed myself to pursuing to find pathways out of homelessness for those still living on the streets of Cape Town. And to this end, I opened up 2 independent living spaces for the homeless. Both of these houses were run by the homeless for the homeless, and I started them with funding from Community Chest, an organisation in the Western Cape. It was done as a research project to try and show the significance of other housing programs that should, if not become the starting point for assisting people experiencing homelessness to start their journey to reintegrate back into society, at least it should complement the current emergency and temporary accommodation offered by the City of Cape Town through their safe spaces and the night shelters that are funded by the provincial government. Both of these houses were a huge success within a few months, and within 6 months we were talking about 87% of the individuals that came into the house were still in the house, and 83% of them had secured jobs and were still in their jobs. The other aspect that we found quite astounding was that the minute you got a roof over somebody's head, the next thing that they start looking towards is maintaining that roof, and that means that they are looking for jobs. Hence the fact that 83% of the individuals in the program that we started with our house within 6 months had been employed or had started employment for themselves. It also taught me that when looking for answers towards homelessness, we always have to look closer at what the homeless themselves are doing. And so when it came to upliftment and empowerment projects, which I then started when I started my consultancy, I looked to the homeless for those answers. And I'm mentioning these programs because they become relevant to when we get to my suggestion to the city as to this bridging period that we are now facing in Cape Town. The 2 programs that I'm looking at specifically that we are currently running are the Heart program, which is Art with a Heart, Homeless Art with a Heart, where homeless people have basically self-taught themselves to become artists, and there are some brilliant artists amongst them. And so we teach them how to make this a sustainable means of actually living their lives and earning money from their art. They retain 100% of the rights to their art, and they decide how much it sells for. And the other program is the Trash to Treasures program, where we've taken another thing that the homeless are involved in, and that is recycling, and taken that and built it up to empower those that are in the informal sector by building up the recycling economy as such. Whereas apartheid legislation limited black urbanization prior to 1990, a marked steady increase has occurred since 1994. This naturally led to an increase in those that ended up living on the streets, as well as those who lived in conditions one would consider to be attributed to being homeless. Even though it's impossible to ignore the reality that is homelessness in Cape Town and South Africa at the moment in the whole, the very real living conditions and of hundreds of thousands of South Africans is rendered almost non-existent if you look at government policy, societal practices and financial investment. South Africa, with its progressive constitution, which is lauded the world over, has not progressed into the ruling party actually having made a priority of a national policy for homelessness, which is non-existent in South Africa, and also not a department that specifically oversees the people living on the street. At provincial level, there's only a white shelter document, which is basically the policy on shelters and the norms and standards, which is a good document for the shelters that the provincial government does fund throughout the Western Cape. and specifically in Cape Town. These are all temporary and emergency shelters of nature. And then we get to the city of Cape Town, which is the only government tier that actually has a policy and a department, but unfortunately, due to the fact that they're the only ones and the fact that they consider it to be a successful model and are not prepared to see the situation as it is at the moment, and that it is potentially going to implode on us. And so South Africa, Cape Town being the one city that has the biggest potential of actually addressing homelessness and finding a solution to chronic homelessness, potentially can end up being the biggest disappointment of it all. Also, we need to define homelessness because the city of Cape Town, the provincial government and the national government have not got an official definition for homelessness. And for all intents and purposes of the discussion we're having this afternoon, as well as my 10-year plan, I define homelessness as being an experience where people do not have a home in which they have shelter, that they can exercise control over a physical area, can maintain privacy, and enjoy social relations through tenancy rights or ownership. And people living on the streets, people living in parks, people living in squats, shelters, as well as sleeping at friends' homes on couches, these are all considered by this definition to be homeless, which obviously increases our amount of homeless people in Cape Town to over 100,000. The other thing we have to take note of is that we must stop referring to people living on the streets as homeless. By describing someone as experiencing homelessness, rather than simply calling them homeless, you are describing something that the person is going through rather than defining them by it. This humanizes their homelessness a little more and gives those experiencing homelessness the dignity that they deserve. So homelessness is a state, it's not a trait. We must also try and realize that one-size-fits-all solutions are not for homelessness, because there are more than one pathway into homelessness. Also, when we look at the people living on the street, politicians who keep talking about homelessness being a mental health issue or a consequence of drug abuse are not telling the truth. They are neglecting to tell you about women and children running from abuse, or the numbers of adolescents running from sexual abuse, the elderly rejected by their families, those with physical disabilities abused and rejected by family and community, or the LGBTQI youth who are rejected by family and community, prisoners that are released from prison, as well as those that come out of orphanages after the age of 18 and land up on the streets, and those that merely lose their jobs and do not have a security net beneath them. They also land up on the streets. The other challenge that we're facing is that neither the city, the province or the national government have any idea of how many people are living on the streets, with the last count done by the city showing 764 people living on the city in the CBD in the city of Cape Town. Our current count shows 7,000 people living in that area. This has been due to an influx of people coming onto the streets through COVID, and then also those that were forcefully removed in previous years, 2010, 2017, and then with Strandfontein. With Strandfontein, when they decided to close the camp after 6 weeks, all of those individuals were given their tents, their mattresses and their blankets and delivered to wherever they wanted to be on the streets of Cape Town. Some individuals choose to live in encampments due to a lack of better housing alternatives. And so when these masses started arriving in Cape Town, a lot of them, because the shelter system is either full or because of conditions not being conducive to their current situation, incompatible with an individual situation at that particular point, people started going into and forming encampments. The conducting of evictions of encampments often displaces individuals rather than reduces the number of individuals experiencing homelessness. And so the idea that the city now has of evicting a number of spots in the Cape Town area in order to get encampments away from hubs that are especially popular with tourists, as well as the financial hubs, is not a good idea. We are looking at, without referrals to transitional accommodation, housing or additional resources, this approach fails to target the root causes of homelessness and can instead further destabilize established communities. And so I have to ask the question whether the City of Cape Town wants to do the evictions because they want to help the homeless, or whether it is merely for financial reasons for the actual City of Cape Town's tourist trade as well as the economy. Criminalising the homeless also makes the barriers to housing and employment less or more, because rather than addressing the cause of homelessness, you're actually making it more difficult for people to come out of homelessness. It's also important that we realize that by providing individuals experiencing homelessness with connections to services, individuals living in encampments can experience improved access to support services and transitional or permanent housing options. Municipal support and involvement with encampments can also create the opportunity for a relationship to and trust building that is often key to ushering individuals living in encampments into other housing opportunities. The housing opportunities that are available for long-term consideration with my 10-year plan are Housing First being the more significant one of the transitional spaces that we are looking at, and independent living spaces. But as I said, I don't want to spend too much time on that, because this is something that we are now trying to bridge towards is going to be the 10-year plan. But up until then, the solution to homelessness is going to lie in communities where inclusivity and a sense of belonging and a place to call home are made available to the homeless. I, as a homeless person, will tell you that even prior to thinking about having a roof over my head again, the most important thing was to feel as if I had some sense of belonging in that community where I lived. The idea and the proposal is to have an action plan to reduce the reliance of street-based residents on handouts and crime in every suburb in Cape Town. We are trying to offer a solution to turn the tide on uncontrollable and potentially dangerous encampments, and establish a continuum of care made up of everybody in the actual community, so that we have a community-centered solution to uplift homeless people. Street-based residents can enter into membership program that is solely aimed at providing them with the basic human provisions: food, housing, purpose, community care and appreciation. And so the members are provided with safe, uniform, structured tents, daily meals, work opportunities, growth opportunities, mental health guidance, opportunity to educate themselves and others, assisted with their IDs and a bank account for savings. And so the community is providing these services in conjunction with NGOs and other partners. The services offered by the people living on the street will be, for example, the cleaning of streets, weeding, riverbanks, black binning, security, visible presence, reporting to local SID. They become the eyes and the ears. They can get rewarded for their intel. Cooking for 2 daily meals, the gardening, landscaping that is required in the area, markets where they can have sales. There'll be guys with trades, plumbing, etc. that will be able to assist. So it's a win-win situation. Then we look at the food security. We can use the existing feeding programs in those areas, but we can use the guys that are now part of the members as cooks, servers and gardeners, along with volunteers and NGOs. They'll get 2 healthy meals a day. A community-based urban farming for surplus herbs, fruit, vegetables, and for cooking can be established within the community garden. If there is space for a community garden at the building or at the space that is made available. And so if we have this space being provided within a 5-kilometre radius of the centre of the actual ward, then I feel that we will have a buy-in from both the community as well as the homeless individuals, and we will be able to establish development of community. The theory of change with regards to homelessness is usually becoming belonging, where people are who they are when they land up on the streets and after their journey being on the streets. And then when they come out of homelessness, or when they start programs, like for example we are proposing here, then they become the best version of themselves that they can possibly be. And then it depends on the community to accept them and give them a sense of belonging. And so our goals here are to improve the lives of all residents of Cape Town, reduce chronic homelessness, create jobs, reduce crime, strengthen community and improve local economy. So those are the goals that we are striving for with this proposal of actually formalizing, be it an encampment or be it a building that the community makes available. But the core issue here is that the community, housed and unhoused, stay in charge. So what we'll have is a membership contract between the housed and the unhoused. There'll be food security, there'll be housing which is safe, or even if it is in a tent. There'll be services provided, growth opportunities and mentorship. And so this is not a permanent solution that we're suggesting. We are suggesting this during the crisis period where at the moment the city has no plan. The one thing that is very, very important is that people realize how important community is in solving homelessness, because that sense of belonging, that sense of not ignoring people, getting to know the individuals in your area is what the crux is going to be. As I mentioned prior, the Trash to Treasures program is dependent on communities starting to believe in the homeless in their areas and utilizing both, vice versa, the homeless, the community, and the community, the homeless. Here we have the encampments as they were. If you look at this photograph, which was taken at the COVID-19 camps under the Kulenburg Bridge, which only lasted for a week, you'll see that encampments can actually work if they are controlled and serviced. And so my suggestion at the moment is, rather than continue with the situation we have at the moment, that we look at establishing these community camps. I really don't feel that we can afford to have forced evictions as is being planned by the City of Cape Town. I think that it is necessary that we look at solving the problem and not making the problem even bigger than it is at the moment. There are ways of making these areas that I'm just talking about, be it a building or an area, that they are controlled, and we will then have an idea of what the situation is, provide services to those in the meantime whilst we are working on the 10-year plan, and have a plan forward. At the moment, there is no plan forward, because just opening up a few 100 bed spaces for the rest of this year is not going to solve the problem that we are faced with at the moment throughout Cape Town.